Hello, Star Citizens, and welcome to another episode of Break It Down and Roll It Up, a new series where we break down big events in Star Citizen that can be a little bit, let's say, sharp, and we roll them up into one nice big blunted video, you know, to keep them from being sharp. That's what we mean by blunted in these videos. So, it's easier to understand if we, do these types of roll-ups, so that's why we do them. We also insert a little bit of opinion and speculation, and we try to state that every time we do that, but mostly it's to take a massive video and kind of break it down a little bit, just so the information is not too hazy. So, you guys have probably been waiting a while for this part 2, this day 2 video. I was sick. I'm still a little bit under the weather, and interestingly enough, I was going to do this whole thing where I was like, I'm just gonna push through it. And I was like, you know what? I did enough of that with my ship reviews. Let me take a few days and just try to get a little better. So I am feeling a lot better, but still got a little bit of a tinge of it. So just to let you know as we go forward in this video. Also, I think I fixed my video issues. I've had a lot of those if you've been following my videos. So this one should be much better, and my face should be on the entire video with the audio synced. So let's get into it. So day 2, I think it started out with crafting your home. So they just jumped straight into it. So this started at I want to say it was the 1 hour and 4 minute mark. And I think it went to like the 1 hour and 26 minute mark. I think it was like a 20-minute presentation. So this was Rick Porter, the design director, Thorsten Lyman, lead systems designer, Jacob Taylor, senior gameplay programmer, Declan Holmes, Luke Gibertsi. I'm assuming that a lot of the letters in your last name are pronounced silently, and Luke is the lead environment artist. So if you see the name, you know that is a slightly difficult name to pronounce, but I still want to give credit where credit's due. So basically, this one was all about crafting. They asked the question, what is crafting, right? And then they proceeded to try to explain what it is. So it started with professions. That's one of the things they talked about. Then progression, then resource gathering. So they talked about this idea of like hunting and harvesting. And then they talked about salvaging and mining. So when they talk about those things, they were saying that basically they're all going to have their own little, like each type will have its own like unique materials, and then you'll need to do all of them to get all of the materials. For instance, like you might have to go hunting to get something for your blueprint, and then you might have to go salvaging to get something for your blueprint. Then you might have to go mining to get something for your blueprint, and then you might have to refine some of the stuff you mine to get something for your blueprint. And we'll talk more about what blueprints are, but that's the idea, is like you're gonna have to do all of these things to get what you want. And so it used to be that refining used to only be for mineable ore. Now, it used to be that it was just for the mineable ore. Now you have the ore, you have fauna, right? So like this could be like tusks from an animal or eggs or stuff like that. That can be refined. And then you have flora, so that means like plants and stuff that comes from plants, like maybe like coconut shells or something like that. Maybe all that stuff can be made into something. So all raw materials. Now a refinery can handle all raw materials. And that is huge because that means you'll have uses for unrefined stuff and for refined stuff. So some stuff you might not have to refine, and other stuff you will. So sometimes, you want to wait before you just go straight to refining everything. Make sure you have your blueprints first. And again, we'll talk about what blueprints are, but essentially blueprints are just the thing that you own that tells you how to create something, whether it's an FPS weapon, whether it's whatever else, like, it could be a tool, it could be an FPS weapon, it could be, a grenade, whatever you're building, the blueprint is what tells you how to do it. All right. So we'll get more into that. But the idea is they wanted there to be some type of customization, They wanted there to be upgrades. They wanted you to be, and that included buildings, right? They wanted you to be able to upgrade your gear, but they also wanted you to be able to create buildings, and they wanted you to be able to upgrade everything. So you can upgrade weapons, you can upgrade everything. And that was one of the big bombs that they dropped, was that you can upgrade pretty much everything. And also another bomb that they dropped, well, I'll try to handle these in order, but another bomb that they dropped was that the stuff that you might get from the store might not be the highest quality. So you might get like the lowest quality stuff from the store, or maybe it's, you know, one step above the lowest quality. And in order to get the best stuff, you actually have to find the blueprints or find somebody who sells that higher quality item. And that's huge, because if you have to go out and actually engage with other players to get the highest quality gear, that's going to bring players together. And that makes it a player-driven economy rather than a store-driven economy, right? You might be able to go, like, for instance, you might be able to get, you know, and I'll talk about what the tiers mean later, but you might be able to get a tier 1 P8, which does like 125 DPS, and then a tier 2 does 180, and then a tier 3 does like 270 or something, like some ridiculous amount more, to the point where it's like, like it's not even worth it unless I have the tier 3. So on and so forth. But basically they started this by saying that player choice matters. They wanted the economy to be player driven. They wanted you to have to gather raw materials, refine them, and then after you refine them, you could decide, do I want to profit from this? Do I want to craft some gear, you know, like I said, improved gear? Do I want to craft a vehicle? Do I want to craft ships? Yes, we can craft ships. You should all know this already. This video is coming like 10 days after the announcement, so you should all know this. Yes, you can craft gear, vehicles, ships, and like I said, it might end up being better than the stuff they sell in the shops. And you have the ability to build a base. And if you could create a building, you can build a base, you know. And being able to trade with both NPCs and with players is going to be incredible, because sometimes there's just not enough players on the server. So knowing that NPCs will also be coming to buy your stuff, so there was this argument about the Banu Merchantmen a while back where people were saying, well, nobody's ever going to come and buy your stuff when you're selling with a Banu Merchantman, because like, why would I go to you when I can go to one of the shops that's much closer to where I am? Well, the first thing is, I always said this was going to be balanced out, but now it's obvious. I have better stuff than the shop. That's going to be pretty much guaranteed for anybody who sells stuff in a Banu Merchantman that knows what they're doing. So me having better stuff is one reason to come to me. 2, I don't need you to come to me, because I'm going to have NPCs that will come to me, right? And so I think that's going to be huge, right? And you know, you probably do want players to come to you, but not being dependent on players, I think, is going to be huge. So, all right, so blueprints, these are basically your recipes for crafting and refining. So you're not just going to be able to refine everything, and this might be something that people are missing. You're not going to just be able to refine everything. You're not going to just be able to grab something and be like, oh, I'll just chuck it in the refinery. No, you actually will have to find like blueprints for how to refine a certain thing, or you'll have to go to somebody who already has that blueprint. And so blueprints are basically the new form of money now, right? Like, yes, you can have money and you could be a billionaire, so to speak, with money, but you can also be a billionaire when it comes to your blueprint knowledge. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have like 1 million alpha, or let's say UEC. Let's say UEC. I have 1 million UEC, right? And I also know like 5 blueprints, right? But I'm a base builder. Versus another base builder who has 100 blueprints, but only has like 20,000 alpha UEC. Now, who do you think is going to make more money? Starting from where I am now, if I have 1 million plus 5 blueprints, or 20,000 UEC and 100 blueprints, right? The person with 100 blueprints that 100 blueprints is worth way more than $1 million or 1 million alpha UEC or UEC. And it's so obvious that that's going to be the case. So blueprints are the new like top tier thing. And not everybody's going to be able to get your blueprints, right? I can imagine you being able to unlock certain things. Like I could see a whole concierge reward thing happening with certain blueprints. I could see referrals for blueprints. I can see like they can find a way to monetize that. But I don't think that they'll monetize all of it, because I think they want to give people, again, a reason to play the game, and they don't just want all of everything to be purchasable. But I can imagine like some blueprints hitting the store in some ways or form. And maybe it's just the bottom level of that blueprint. Maybe you don't get the tier 2 or the tier 3. So we'll find out. But let me continue explaining the blueprint thing, right? So blueprints are generally acquired as, you know, they're rewards for like reputation levels, for buying, for looting. Whatever you end up doing, like, you know that your overall goal is to get a blueprint, right? You can't sell them. That's a big deal. Whenever you get a blueprint, it's like burned into your memory. It's not like something you can trade and sell or whatever. You can make the item and sell the item, but you cannot give away a blueprint. You can't say, here's a blueprint for you, or here's a blueprint for you. So that's gonna be cool, because that makes your actual account very valuable. Because imagine an account with, you know, 5,000 blueprints on it, and then you sell that to somebody. That's huge, right? Like if you sell that account to somebody. Now, I don't know if selling accounts is allowed through RSI's terms of service, so I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying, like, you can imagine how somebody would find an account valuable that has a bunch of blueprints on it. And this is probably gonna end up being my favorite CitizenCon of all time, because they talked about base building. I want you to understand that that's because base building is my thing. They just explained exploration, and they explained base building. Base building has always been my goal, and they kind of explained science a little bit, right? And so if those being my things, this was always going to be my best CitizenCon, because they explained so much of it. And so, I mean, like I said, I'll be going to CitizenCon every year from now on, but this is the one for me. So if you're wondering why this video is super long, because this is my jam. This is my jam. Construction and science are my jam. Anyway, you can upgrade your blueprints through research. See where I'm going? Construction, science, that's where I'm going. All right. So they interestingly enough, I liked science and construction separately, and it seems like they've tied them together. So like everything you do with science or research and stuff like that can lead to your construction stuff, and that's exactly what I was planning on doing. So it's like the fact that CIG was already planning to do that. I mean, great minds, you know, it could be one of those things, or it could just be like, maybe I saw the writing on the wall and that's why it came to me. But very cool stuff. So the biggest thing is material quality. All right. So all materials will have a quality rating, and it looked like it's going to be out of 1,000. So anywhere from 1 to 1,000, with 1,000 being the best quality and 1 being the lowest. And I can imagine, you know, MMOs can get crazy with this stuff, right? So, you know, there could be stuff that's above 1,000 that's super rare or something like that they can give away for contests. Like, they basically figured out their MMO strategy, and I love that, because, you know, people don't have to ask what is Star Citizen anymore. And I'll have some future content on this. And if you're wondering, and if you're watching these videos, I will at some point break these videos down and put them up, you know, as single videos, like for each subject, so people can watch them later. But that's going to be a while from now, because I need time to do it. And I have other plans. I still have some ships to review before IAE. But yeah, so material quality is going to be a huge deal, because and what I love is that they made it to where, you know, you can get materials that are low quality and they still have a use. Now, the quality rating can be, if you use it as a secondary material, just how much of the material you will produce. So like, even if I have the lowest quality stuff, I might still be able to get 1 of the thing I'm trying to use my blueprint for, or maybe 2. But if I have high quality, that would let me get like 50 of the thing I'm trying to produce or whatever. So I like that it does that. So it's not like, oh, well, this is trash quality, so I have no use for it. It's like, no, I can use all of the qualities, but you want higher quality because it's more efficient. And quality, and you know what we saw on screen was not the full thing. They said there's going to be purity, there's going to be ripeness, like stuff like that. So it's like, you know, if you get a, let's say some type of space apple, that's basically going to be how ripe is that apple, because it's high quality if it's ripe and it's low quality if it's not, or something like that, right? And then if we're talking about diamonds, right, which you need to create glass in Star Citizen, if you get diamonds, how pure is the diamond? Like, does it have a whole bunch of dirt inside of it or whatever, or is it like absolutely crystal clear? So, and there you have it, your purity rating and stuff like that. So I like the way they did it, high quality and low quality, both having some stat properties, you know. Well, let's talk about stats. So they do have item stats now. So you don't have stats, but your weapons will have stats, and all the items that can be used for things will have stats, right? So each stat will be modifiable. So you have damage, armor, handling, wear resistance, things like that. And this is so that there could be some customization and some progression, because they don't want it to just be, well, everybody has the same weapon. They want it to be, well, yeah, you have a tier 1 weapon. We have the same weapon, but yours is tier 1 and mine is tier 4. So if we were to fight each other, as long as we're the same skill level, of course, I would destroy you, because, you know, I have the better weapon, so to speak. And it gives you that MMO progression without actually having to level up your character, right? You level up your gear, you can lose your gear. They haven't announced whether we'll be able to put insurance on gear yet, but they have said we can put it on ships, but I'll talk about ship insurance a little bit later. Things are gonna get interesting though. Things are gonna get interesting when we get to that section. So when they brought up the crafting screen, and there was a few things. So there was the materials section. All right, so I'll just put it up on the screen if I remember to. I'll put it up on the screen. It'll be either there or there. Yeah, let's do over there. It had parts required, and they were using a solid, right? Some things will require liquid, some things will require solid. And then there was a few options for solid, like aluminum, plastic, copper, and then I think like hadanite or something like that. So whatever you're picking, it'll come up like any MMO screen where you have to pick your parts that you want to insert. And then there's like an upgrade section, there's a repair and maintenance section, there's a paint section, and then they actually constructed like the Volt pistol. So the Volt pistol being an FPS weapon, you can kind of see where it came from. Obviously, you're gonna need solids for that, not liquids, so on and so forth, right? So it looked like it required 2 SCU of aluminum for the frame of the weapon. So the frame, it says, determines the integrity and the weight. So integrity, I'm thinking, is like how quickly will it wear, or it's the health of the weapon. Like when you initially create it, is it like built solid, or is it like kind of flimsy, affecting your, what do you call it? Like how steady your, I can't think of the word right now, but how steady your weapon fires when you shoot, right? Like, because it could either be like, poof, and then like, that's good, or it could be like, boom, and then like your hand flies all over the place. I can't remember what the word is to save my life right now, but you know what I'm talking about. And then it has like 2 SCU of copper for the wiring, right? Now, when you think about that, 2 SCU is huge. Like, imagine needing all of that copper. But I think that's on purpose, because they want, maybe it's like something to where the wire, because these are futuristic weapons, maybe you need this massive ton of wire because there's a machine that can like condense it to like really small, like, you know, like not like a trash compactor, but like imagine like you needed like this huge box of wire, but then there's a machine that can turn that huge box of wire into this like super heavy little chunk of wire, but that it's only like this big, and then that being what you need for the weapon, right? This like super condensed piece of wiring, but maybe you don't need the entire chunk, you just need a piece of super condensed wiring for the weapon. And then that's what determines your fire rate, because that's what the copper is used for. And I like the way they did it, because it's semi-realistic, right? Like, we don't know how to do an actual Volt pistol. It doesn't actually exist in real life. That's how it works. And then you have 2 SCU of hadanite for the condenser. And some of it might be waste material too. It might not be the super condensed stuff. It might be that in order to create the type of wiring you need, it has to burn through 1 7/8 SCU worth of copper just to get the good best quality of copper that it can get. So it still can make sense, you know, you just have to kind of use your brain a little bit to get to that. And then there's the accumulated quality. So let's say you use low quality, you use low quality hadanite for the condenser, and you use low quality copper for the wiring. But then for the frame, you use super high quality aluminum, right? Like all those things will mix together, and that's how you will get your accumulated quality. If we look at the stats of this, now we're done. We've crafted the volt pistol. Now we just need to know what the stats mean. So they had integrity, which looks to me to be the weapon health. Then there's wear resistance, and this is why I decided this is weapon health instead, because it can't be wear if there's something else for wear resistance, right? So wear resistance, ability to perform like new after continued use, and then there's a misfire chance reduction. So there's a stat where you can reduce the chance your weapon will temporarily fail, and that is cool. Then we already saw wiring, right? That's what affects the fire rate, which is how fast each projectile leaves the weapon. So whether that be a laser or a bullet, right? And then bullet velocity. So I want to make a difference between these two. So how fast it leaves the weapon is not the same as how fast it moves once it leaves the weapon to get to the target. Those are two different things, okay? So bullet velocity is once it actually is outside the gun or the weapon, how fast does it go from the barrel to the target? Because if it has a very fast velocity, you won't be able to move or dodge it or whatever, and it'll most likely hit a moving target multiple times. If it has a slower velocity, it may not hit a moving target as well. But normally, slower velocity means larger round or something like that. So it probably does more damage if it does hit. And then you have the effective range. So if you know weapons at all in real life, then you know that there's an effective range. Now you can just, that doesn't mean it, if the person is, or the thing you're trying to hit is not within that effective range, it doesn't mean you won't hit. It just means this is the best range to shoot at with, right? So let's say the effective range is 50 meters, right? Well, let's say, better yet, 40 to 50 meters. Right? So if you're within the 40 to 50 meters, this weapon will perform exactly as it says it will perform. Now, if you're closer, maybe the damage goes up, but like your accuracy, or maybe your accuracy goes up, but your damage goes down. And maybe it's the opposite if you're further away. So that's what the effective range is. It's the proximity in which you will enjoy the full abilities of the weapon. And then outside of that range, you might have issues with like accuracy or damage or something else, right? Like, for instance, if you're shooting with a sniper rifle, right? The range on that might be 350 meters or 250 meters, whatever, 250 to 350, right? So if you're closer, your accuracy is going to be off because it can't account for the fact that the bullet is supposed to go down and drop because you're supposed to be far away. So maybe the bullet goes straight and then you miss your target because it went too straight, and the bullet, you're supposed to be far enough to where the bullet can fall a little bit and go into the target. And then it could be the opposite. Maybe if they're too far away, let's say you're 450 away, the bullet falls too fast and then it hits the ground before it hits the target. So you have to adjust for that if you're too far away or too close. More stats on this stuff because I digress a lot. That is me. Heat per shot was one of the things that I saw. So that affects your infrared visibility and how hot your weapon gets. Now, it's two things, right? So if your weapon gets really hot, that makes you easier to identify by people who are using infrared sight. So like a tracker, for instance, like we talked about in day one, they could see you much easier if your weapon's heating up. But that's not it. It's not just your visibility, it's how hot your weapon gets. Because if your weapon gets too hot, it might malfunction, or it may cease to function completely because it's too hot. So if that's the case, then you really, really need to check your fire to make sure your weapon doesn't overheat during, the heat of battle, so to speak. Not a pun. And then there was two more. There was cooldown rate. So that's how quickly your weapon reduces that infrared visibility and that heat of your weapon, right? And so all of these things are affected by the quality of the materials you bring or the type of materials, right? Because you can say maybe copper wiring is like the lowest quality wiring that you could use. So it only, even if you use the highest quality copper, it still is only going to get your stat so high. But maybe if you use platinum wiring, then your stat goes all the way up here or something like that. So just giving you an example of like how this stuff can be completely unique. A weapon can overheat and cease to function if it's not allowed to cool off as necessary, or if it has a really high cooldown rate, you might not need to do that as much, right? Like a tier, I think they said the highest tier would be tier 5. So, which I don't think so. I think they'll have a tier for like legendary weapons above whatever they say the highest is. So if they say it's tier 5, they'll have a tier 6, which is legendary, which are like stats you won't be able to change, but they'll be so good. It'll be like, if you find this, like, it's a legendary item, right? Because I think that just exists in every game, and it's just a cool thing to have. But yeah, you can imagine a tier 5, you know, weapon having a cooldown rate of like next to 0, where like this thing doesn't have to cool down, and that's like the thing. Or maybe it's that legendary item that has no cooldown rate, which is like, they don't want those to be everywhere. They don't want everybody to be able to craft those. So it might actually make more sense to have that as a legendary weapon, where you find this weapon and it has no cooldown whatsoever. Like, this thing could just shoot until it's done. And that is huge in a firefight. So, and then the weight. That's like how much does it take to carry it, right? If you're playing an MMO, you kind of know that weight kind of has to be a thing to keep people from having like an infinite bag of holding from like D&D. So yeah, it makes sense to have weight. And maybe that's part of it. You know, maybe it's space, like the amount of space you have in your backpack or on your armor or on your clothing. And then there's also weight. So it's like, you can't bring 2 rocket launchers and still run at full speed. It just doesn't work that way. Unless maybe you can if you have some type of powered armor or something. Maybe if you have the tank armor, you can still run at full speed, but your speed is already slow anyway, you know, so it might be something like that. So then they said, we can craft food. So all you cooks out there, this one's for you. Like if you want to create bread or some type of bread, or you want to create some type of stew, right? Then you're gonna need to find quality bread and quality like quasi beef, right? And then if you want mustard and ketchup, maybe you have to find some type of liquid that can give you that, or maybe you need mustard seeds, or, you know, who knows what you're gonna need. And then you can affect the nutrition of the thing, right? And you know, the weight as well, but weight won't be as important for food, I don't think. But like, imagine low quality beef being something that like, it'll keep you, you know, from being hungry for an hour, versus high quality beef, like you eat this, you don't need to eat for the rest of the day. So that's what I think we're gonna get kind of with the nutrition thing. And they kind of signified that. It's not like I'm not just like pulling this out of thin air. This is kind of what they signified. You can control based on the ingredients you use, the quality of the thing, right? So then there were the crafting buttons. So with crafting time, you know, this is listed at the bottom of, you know, this is real world time. This is how long it'll actually take in the real world to craft this item. So it could be 20 minutes for just an average thing. Let's say you're crafting that bolt pistol and it says 20 minutes. Now there might be things that you can use to lower the amount of time it takes, like, and maybe the quality of ingredients lowers the amount of time it takes. Maybe you can upgrade your blueprint and that affects the time it takes. So there's so many ways where just getting better quality stuff can like affect your entire, you know, construction and manufacturing. I guess right now we're talking about manufacturing. Construction is more so buildings and real estate stuff. So let's say manufacturing, right? And then there's this autofill thing where it like fills there's a button that I saw at least where it said it would fill the required ingredients to craft automatically. That means, let's say you're doing a hot dog, right? And it says you need 1/8 of bread, and then you need 1/8 of quasi beef, and then you need at least one of either ketchup or mustard or something. And let's say you have the mustard, you have the bread, and you have the beef. and you don't want to go through and select all of it and select quality and all of that stuff. You just hit autofill, and then it boop brings all the stuff that you have, if you have everything, and it automatically fills it in where it needs to go. Because a lot of people aren't going to care too much about like the quality, especially if they know all the stuff that they have is high quality or all the stuff they have is low quality, and they just want to hurry up and build something. So I like that feature. And then it'll let you choose how many to craft, and this is where you get into like, what are you actually bringing to the table? If you're bringing low quality stuff, that's probably going to be, you're going to be able to craft less of the item. But if you bring high quality stuff, you can most likely, craft more. And then it'll be on a little progression bar that shows you how close your crafting is to being done. So let's talk about these tiers, right? Now, the way that they listed the tiers, they said there was tier 5 was the highest. I'm gonna go a bit higher than that. So I think if I'm not mistaken, and this may not be universal to every MMO, so but let's say tier 1 is the lowest quality gear and tier 6 is the highest, right? So tier 1 would be like low quality, and let's say this is white gear, right? So this is like the gear that when you find it, it has a white glow on it when you pick it up. And then tier 2, this would be basic quality. This would be green gear. So this is like stuff you find. Some might call it common gear, where it's like, it's not bad, but it ain't good either. It's the stuff you find in the beginning of the game. White gear and green gear are like stuff that you find everywhere, low quality, and like you get it for beating low quality, not even bosses, but just like you get this stuff for just beating certain like basic mission stuff, right? And then you get blue gear. Blue gear is your first quality piece of gear, right? This is good quality. So tier 1 is low. Tier 2 is basic quality, and then tier 3 is good quality. It's your first good gear. Like this is stuff that you would get for completing like a pretty solid mission or beating a boss or something like that. And then maybe at a certain point in your career, your reputation, gaining time, maybe blue becomes the base of all the stuff you get. Like the lowest quality stuff that you'll get from missions is blue. Now, blue quality gear is the stuff that like you mostly will end up using until you could find like that slightly better thing. So if we're going from like what this stuff would be called, so let's say bare minimum gear, but there's another word for it that I just can't think of. If I could think of it after, then I'll put it up here on the screen. Bare minimum gear is white, common gear is green, uncommon gear is blue, and then we have tier 4, which is great quality, and that is purple gear. So let's say tier 4 is purple gear. I can't confirm these colors, but I'm just going off what I remember from the last time I played other MMOs, which is a long time ago. And I believe purple gear was like a big deal. Like purple gear is the stuff you find the most. Like it's the best reward outside of doing like raids and stuff like that. So when you get purple gear, that's when you're like, oh yes, like this, it's the first one that feels like, oh, this is an amazing piece of gear. And purple gear, I would say it depends on which MMOs you're coming from, but I would call it rare gear. So you have, bare minimum gear, common gear, uncommon gear, and then purple is where you get to rare gear. Rare gear, that's what I would call it. So then you have tier 5, which is the highest quality that we can craft. That is excellent quality, that is orange gear. So orange gear would be epic quality. So we would say this is epic gear, all right? And that's the highest quality most people will ever see unless they do raids and stuff like that. And that's what I think, that's like, most people are just trying to find the orange gear. They're trying to find the excellent quality, the epic gear. And I think that's the stuff that'll take the longest to build and stuff like that. And most stuff, when it gets to that level, it'll have, I think we're doing diminishing returns at that level. Like when you go from excellent to legendary, I don't think there's gonna be the massive difference. It'll just be like one thing that just makes it clearly better. So let's talk about that. So tier 6, now they said everything goes up to tier 5. I think there will be a tier 6, and I think it will be legendary quality gear, and I think it will be gold gear, And that's the same. So, you know, you go epic gear, then legendary gear, or hero gear, depending on like what MMO you're coming from. But that's the stuff where they're one of one. There's only one of them. Like either you're the only one that gets it, or only people who do this very specific thing can get this particular piece of gear. And maybe even then it's randomized and the stats in it aren't necessarily the same. It might be that I get a legendary piece of, let's say a legendary Volt pistol, and it has no recoil. Mine has no recoil, but then somebody else gets a legendary Volt pistol and it has recoil, but it has twice the fire rate of a normal Volt pistol, whereas like every other Volt pistol doesn't have that. Even the other legendary pistol only has like a normal fire rate. So it you know, whatever you get for your legendary quality might be unique, which is what makes it like a legendary gear piece, because it's like if somebody unalives you and then takes yours, then it's like, oh, I just got this like legendary piece of gear from this person or whatever. Now, I don't think you'll be able to craft legendary gear. I think it will be something that you have to find. So that's what I think they mean by like the highest level you can craft is tier 5, but I think you'll be able to find legendary gear. And I think that'll be your tier 6 stuff. And maybe you'll be able to find legendary blueprints that allow for like a one-time use, right? So maybe you can craft it, but you can only craft it once. So like you gotta go and find the highest quality everything before you craft this. So that way when you craft it, you're not wasting the legendary thing, right? So we'll see how that ends up working, but one of the things I love is that you can upgrade your vehicles, upgrade your ships, upgrade everything. Everything in the game that has stats, you will be able to upgrade, and I am loving that, because I will just log on, go find blueprints, go find materials, and then upgrade. Go find blueprints. Like that's all I'll be doing. Like everybody else, maybe you have like some other thing you want to do in the game. Nope. I'm just going, finding blueprints, going, building stuff, blueprints, building stuff, blueprints. Like that's gonna be my whole thing. So it's gonna be fun for me. It did say you can craft to tier 5. It said up to tier 5. Now we know you can upgrade lower tier vehicles to better tiers, but I want to know, can I upgrade something past tier 5? Maybe you can't craft up to tier 6, but maybe you can upgrade to tier 6. So maybe if you craft something at tier 5, you can apply enough upgrades to where it jumps up to that tier 6 level. So and this is like using that, you know, lawyery thing where it's like, you said we couldn't craft up to tier 6. You didn't even mention a tier 6, but you didn't say we couldn't upgrade past tier 5. So there you have it. There's your speculation nation thing. They did a demo where they had less recoil on a gun, and then they had like the high tier had less recoil. Then they did faster quantum spooling on quantum drives for the high tier. And then there was like a scraper beam that scraped a hull way faster. Like it wasn't even close. Like that thing, as soon as you turned it on, it's like whatever section it was on, gone. So yeah, you can definitely tell the difference. And that was just, I think, tier 1 to tier 3. That I don't even think that stuff went to tier 5, because we don't know if everything will have a tier 5. I'm assuming everything will, just because it just follows that MMO thing. If you have 6 levels for everything, it just follows it so well. And maybe they don't do legendary gear. Maybe that's something that they hold off for Star Citizen 1.1 or something. But that's the way I see it happening. The way crafting works in game, they gave the whole breakdown, which I love. You acquire the blueprints. Blueprints are digital. Every blueprint you claim is yours forever. Nobody can steal it. Nobody can take it from you. It can't be traded. You can't give it to somebody, right? So you acquire the blueprint, then you gather the resources, right? Now, you might gather the resources, or you might be like, this isn't quite what I want, and you might do some blueprint research. Now you have to go find a research data bank. If you find a research data bank, you might get the upgrade just from going to that research data bank. You won't use what you find in the research data bank to upgrade. You'll just find the better blueprint. Or you can upgrade your blueprint. That means creating a better, higher tier version, and you will still have access to the lower tier versions every time you get that, right? So If you find, for instance, if you find a tier 5 research thing, which is going to be super rare, right? Like you find something that epic level or excellent level research, you have access to all the ones below it. So it's not like you have to go and find all the lower tiers. You can automatically make those if you're capable of making the tier 5 version, which I love, because it's like, once you find something, you don't want to have to be like, well, that means I can only make this higher tier of stuff. No, that doesn't make sense. Like the better the blueprint, of course it would include all of the stuff below it, right? So I like that. The research will require effort, right? Like, so research might require you to craft 100-volt pistols. Like, in order to learn how to craft a level 2, you have to research, like if I want to craft a level 2 volt pistol, I have to have already crafted 100-volt pistols, because that's what's going to give me the experience to be able to do the level 2, right? And then it'll have optional requirements, right? Like if you eliminate 5 players with the volt pistol, which is more of like an in-game thing, then that'll give you an extra benefit when you get to that point where you upgrade your blueprint, right? So maybe it'll allow you to craft faster or something like that, you know, if you do all of the things, right? But that also those are like the incentives that the devs are giving you to play the game. The devs are saying, well, we want people who use volt pistols to eliminate other players with volt pistols. So if you want to specialize in volt pistols, know that you're going to have to eliminate a lot of players, right? So maybe that might change what you specialize in, because you don't want to have to eliminate 5 players every time in order to be good at volt pistols. So maybe you switch to a different weapon that doesn't require you to eliminate players, but it forces you to eliminate NPCs instead. So that's something that I think is really cool. They can kind of dictate the gameplay by changing the requirements of what's required in order for you to upgrade your blueprints. And then they gave other examples. They said you might have to collect a certain amount of resources to upgrade your blueprint. You might have to complete a mission to upgrade your blueprint. You might have to acquire a certain amount of research data from the Science Guild, which means you have to increase your reputation with the Science Guild. And then they talked about other things that can be included, right, when you're doing your research. Now, if you're trying to upgrade your thing, there's still going to be a timer, right? If you're trying to upgrade your blueprint, you're still going to, like, let's say you found everything you need to, or you completed everything you needed to. In order to upgrade your blueprint, there'll be a timer that says, you know, 1 hour, 1 week, whatever. And then when that timer is done, your blueprints will be forever upgraded, right? But there's something you can add to that called a catalyst. And when you add something, that catalyst will decrease the research time. So let's say your research time is 24 hours, right? And then you find a very high quality catalyst that could take it down from 24 hours to 8 hours, right? Or maybe even 2 hours, right? Maybe a low quality catalyst takes it down from 24 hours to like 20 hours or something like that. But either way, you know, it helps, you know, and I think, again, this gives, you know, a use for everything. And maybe the more catalyst you add, the lower the research time. Let's say you have like a top quality radar, and maybe top quality radars, maybe all they're capable of doing is looking out further for things, or maybe what they're capable of doing at the higher quality is finding better things quicker, right? Like maybe it can identify this is a very high quality versus this is very low quality, and it highlights the high quality stuff. So we don't know yet what the qualities of each particular thing are going to do, but these are just some things that kind of make sense. All right, so then let's say you've got all your resources, you've done everything that you're supposed to do as far as upgrading your research thing to the highest you can do, at least for now. So now you got to get some refining blueprints. You're not done. You got your blueprint for the weapon, but now you got to get the refining blueprint to make sure that you can refine all the materials to what you need them to be. Now, obviously, you can skip this step by going to buy refined materials, but you know how it is. Sometimes people just don't want to buy things from other people. So you got to make sure that your refining blueprints will allow you to create the materials required to build your final product. You have the blueprint research and you're gonna have to find a research data bank. Now, if you find a research data bank that is going to actually have the blueprint in it, that is of the higher tier, and you get every tier underneath the tier that you own. So it's not like you have to find tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. If you find tier 3, you get tier 2 and tier 1. At least that's what it seems like based on what they said. And then you can upgrade blueprints, right? So you can create a better, higher tier version of the blueprint, which then allows you to create a higher tier version of the thing the blueprint is for, and you will still have access to the cheaper versions. Every time you do research, there's going to be things that you have to do in order for that research to be enough. For instance, in order to craft a really good volt pistol, you have to have already crafted 100 volt pistols, right? And if you've done that, then you will have met the standard to upgrade your research. So it's not just finding the blueprint or getting the blueprint from a mission or whatever. You also have to complete the goal attached to that blueprint in order to use it. So it's not as simple as just, oh, I got a blueprint and that's it. Like, you will always have that blueprint, but until you accomplish the goal, you can't use it. And that's really unique because it's not as simple as finding things. You have to play the game. And I like that because, you know, you can't trade them, you can't buy them, so on and so forth. So it's just like, you gotta play the game to get better at the game, and I like that. So then there's optional requirements. So the optional requirements will give it like something extra that you have to do. The optional requirement might be, you know, eliminate 5 players with the volt pistol, right? So that means you have to find a way to kill people kill 5 of the players with volt pistols. Now, that might just mean going on Arena Commander and using the volt pistol, or it might mean you have to do it in game. So if you do it in game, then you have to make sure you do it the lawful way if you are a lawful, you know, player. The research will require effort. So that means when you're doing this research, it might have a requirement that you have to create 100 volt pistols. And if you have to create 100 volt pistols, that means you have to do that before you can actually use this higher tier research blueprint that you have. So you might have a tier 3 blueprint in your inventory, but you can only use the tier 2 until you craft 100 volt pistols, and then that opens up the ability to use the tier 3, because the experience that you gain from creating those 100 volt pistols is basically what they're saying is the in-game reason why you now have the ability to use this higher tier blueprint. So don't think that just you get a tier 5 blueprint and automatically boom, you're crafting epic gear. No, you have to put in the work to actually get to the point where you can use that blueprint. And that's great because it keeps people from having tier 5 stuff day one. Now, if I'm me, right, I might spend an entire 16 hours playing the game, literally just making volt pistols, to the point where I got tier 4 on day one. And people are gonna be looking at me like, how do you already have tier 4? And it's like, because I literally just sat here and I just crafted volt pistols. I went, got everything exactly for a volt pistol, collected it, crafted. Collected it, crafted. So that might be my specialty, right? Now, you know, at a certain point, you know, I hope to be able to stream some of my gameplay, and this will be fun because it'll be like I'll be streaming and being able to chat to people and getting, you know, stuff done. But yeah, it's going to be really fun to do that, I think. And, you know, putting in the work, putting in the hours to actually be able to craft this amazing stuff. And then there's optional requirements. So the optional requirement that they put on the screen was eliminate 5 players with the volt pistol. So if I have to eliminate 5 players, it says players, not NPCs. That means maybe I get to go in Arena Commander and do it, but I might have to do it in game. And if I have to do it in game, that means I have to find a lawful way to do it because I'm a lawful player. Now, if you're a pirate, it might be easier. Just remember, you catch heat by doing that because it says eliminate. It may mean putting them in a down state, or it could mean like eliminate. And if it means eliminate, then it is what it is. Like, there's nothing you can really do about that. But yeah, then they had other examples for things that you might have to do in order to be able to use the higher tier of research, right? So you might have to collect resources, complete missions, and then there's the Science Guild will have things that you can just get from them, right? And then there's the catalyst, right? So if you have a catalyst, if you're using a catalyst, that is something that decreases your research time. So let's say you have already crafted the 100 volt pistols and now you can do tier 3 volt pistols, right? In order to do that, it might take 45 minutes just as a basis without using anything extra. Now, if you use a catalyst, it might take 20 minutes, or maybe it takes 15 minutes because you used a catalyst that is high quality. And maybe if you use a low quality catalyst, it only takes off like 5 minutes or something like that. But that's essentially what a catalyst is supposed to do, decrease your research time. And let's say we're doing this with a radar, right? So maybe a low quality radar either can't find high quality materials, or it can find them, but only if you get really, really close. Whereas a high quality radar can find any quality of material and you don't have to get that close. You know, maybe it has a range of 1,000 meters for finding good quality materials, where a low quality radar might only have 250 meters for being able to find high quality materials. So like that could be a difference maker, right? Because it's gonna be much easier for me to ride around in my Ursa or whatever, you know, being able to find 1,000 and, you know, things within 1,000 meters. Like that'll give me a much better heading of which way to drive and so on and so forth, right? Just giving you an example of how it could work, right? And then there's refining your resources, right? So you get the refining blueprints, you get the primary materials, the second materials, and then the secondary materials, and then the catalyst materials. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So the primary materials, this is what defines the quality. The quality of your primary materials is what defines the quality of your actual item that you're building. So you can choose to use something as a primary material, or you can use it as a secondary material. Now, the secondary material, that is what determines the quantity of the material you make and the time it takes to make that particular quantity. If you're trying to make a volt pistol, since that's what we're talking about, right? Maybe the highest quality volt pistol, you can make one of them because you have a very mediocre quality for your secondary material, you know, but you can make the highest grade of it because you have a really high grade primary material. But then let's say you find a very high grade secondary material, and then you find out you could have made 4 volt pistols of the highest grade if you would have just waited and used this high grade material, right? So it's you still are making a volt pistol. Either way, you get a high tier volt pistol, but the idea is, yes, you get this high tier volt pistol, but you could have had more of them if you used a higher grade material. And then the catalyst is just speeds up the process. That's what the catalyst material is there to do. And maybe if you, in the higher quality catalyst material you use, the faster the process will go. Then we have item fabrication. So certain items will require certain crafting machines. So you may have a new, I think that's the way they showed it. It was like a nutrient processor, and then it was like an item processor, and then it was like a weapon processor or something like that. Or maybe it was a solid processor and a liquid processor, whatever it is. I'll try to put it up here. But yeah, they had different processors for different things. So you might have an ore processor, you might have, now it might be that they all have communal refineries, right? So where it's like, you know, stations will have those, right? Where it's like everybody can go in and refine whatever they want. But then there'll be like player-owned vehicles that can do fabrication. You know, refinery and fabrication are linked, right? Because if you're doing a refinery, you are fabricating something better than what you had, right? But it's like the refinery is where you also find the item fabrication places, right? So, and it might be a vehicle that does it, maybe it's a player-owned hangar, maybe it's a base that's doing it. And then there will be crafting machines that come in different tiers as well. So a tier 1 will be the lowest, and then let's say I don't know if it'll go up to, I don't know if everything will go up to tier 5 or that tier 6 legendary, but let's say tier 5 just for the sake of now. And let's say you can create up to tier 5. But I think they might have mentioned that there was only 3 tiers for buildings, but I don't know if that'll stay that way, because it just makes sense to just have everything have the same amount of tiers. But maybe certain things they just don't want to go tier crazy. I would like to see tiers all the way up, the same for everything. Like maybe there's a legendary crafting machine that can create things in half the time of everything else, or maybe the lowest tier thing, maybe it upgrades the level of everything it uses. So maybe you have tier 1 materials, but even when this machine is so awesome that it can take tier 1 materials and create tier 2 stuff. So I could see that being like a really cool thing. I'm hoping that that's the case, and then we don't really particularly have to worry about if I have tier 1, because if I get such a great machine, then I don't even have to worry about the level of stuff I get, because I know at the very least it'll be able to create tier 2 stuff. But then there'll be types of crafting machines, right? So there'll be fabrication hangars, there's item fabricators, there's chemical. This is what I was looking for earlier. So this is what I'll end up putting up here. If I didn't put up anything earlier, it's because I found this. So there'll be fabrication hangers, and these will be at least in the sizes of small, medium, and large. Now, I'm gonna say that there's probably gonna be XL, and then there'll be space station would be probably the next size above that. So you have small, medium, large, XL, and then station, like space station level, which is like bigger than XL. Now, they didn't particularly show that. Well, they kind of did. I'll talk about that near the end, which is kind of like what they talked about at the end and what you can do with technically that size above XL. But the idea is that you'll have item fabricators, you'll have chemical fabricators, you'll have nutrition fabricators. Now, there will be more than those. We know that for a fact, just because of other things that they've talked about. You get a blueprint, it might be that you need a certain item, a certain chemical, and maybe you don't need anything nutrition, but you might need those two things. So you have to find an item fabricator, and then you have to find a chemical fabricator, right? And to do that. Now, certain vehicles, right, certain ships, right, might have 4 different fabricators, and maybe you can choose which ones are in there, and maybe you can't. So maybe it has every type of fabricator that you need. Maybe it has the item, it has the chemical, it has the nutrition, and then whatever the other ones would be, right? And so you just go to that ship, and then you go to the right hangar, and you're good. But maybe you don't have that ship, and so now you have to go to some of the communal refineries or somebody else's player-owned refinery in order to use it, or use somebody else's ship. So it's pretty cool. And when they were talking about this, my whole thing is I kept thinking about the scale of the crafting. I kept thinking, like, this has got to be amazing. You know, imagine collecting more. They said that the number was 1,000 blueprints. You could collect at least 1,000. It said more than 1,000 blueprints. So even, let's just say, for the sake of math, that's 1,020 blueprints, right? And then all 1,020 of those can be upgraded. Let's say they can all be upgraded, let's say 3 times, just for the sake of math. Just that would be 3,060 things that you can, like, work towards, you know, finding and upgrading. Like, either you need to find that blueprint or you need to upgrade those blueprints. And that is a lot of work. Like that, you can see the thousands of hours that will go into that. Because if it's thousands of blueprints, it's gonna take thousands of minutes to fully see each one of those blueprints. Now, remember that I said you can get a higher tier, which gives you the lower tier. So it may not be that you have to find all 3,000, because maybe you find a tier 3 early on or a tier 2 early on, which makes you not need the tier 1. So let's cut it in half, and let's say it's 1,500 of those blueprints you actually have to find. That's still thousands of hours of gameplay just finding and upgrading blueprints. That's before you even consider the fact that you have to actually figure out what you want to build with those things, or sell those things, or whatever, right? And then you have to meet all of the standards to actually use the higher level blueprint, right? To actually get that higher level of research. So that means you got to go shoot or you got to go create 100 volt pistols, and then you got to go shoot five players or whatever, you know? And so it's gonna I can just see the gameplay. I can see it, and it's really cool. The scale of crafting also includes your ability to research your blueprints. It's gonna require some collaboration, because maybe you're not gonna be able to do all this, you know. Maybe it doesn't require the collaboration, but it'll, if you wanna do it faster, it'll require the collaboration. And all of this stuff affects the economy, right? So like, maybe the economy is really in heavy need of, I don't know, hadanite, and you have a crap ton of hadanite, or you have a bunch of stuff. Maybe it needs the hadanite to create bolt pistols, right? And you have a crap ton of hadanite that's already refined, right? And so people can come to you and get the hadanite, and you can sell it at this crazy price because there's like a very limited amount of hadanite in the entire area. But then let's say like an asteroid hits some planet or something, and now there's a bunch of hadanite that was in that asteroid, right? What you can do now is, you know, if you're keeping abreast of the news that's in the game, you can say, okay, a bunch of Hadanite is there, so like let me sell all of my Hadanite before everybody knows that that Hadanite deposit just hit. Make a huge deposit and then focus on what else. Like, you know, there's going to be a Hadanite rush. So if there's a Hadanite rush, well, you know there's going to be a copper rush because people are going to be able to make way more volt pistols, but people are going to be focusing on mining Hadanite. So you go and you say, I'm going to buy up all the copper, all of it. So by the time that people finish with this Hadanite and they're ready to make their volt pistols, they have to come to me for the copper. And I'll have a bunch of refined copper ready for them. So this is like, you know, the way that it can work inside the game, and you can kind of see how that's working. There's long, you know, outside of player-to-player trade, where you can say, you know, hey, here's the copper, right? There's long-term progression to this, because you might start out with one tier 1 blueprint and end up with 450 tier 3 blueprints or whatever. So you can just see how that works. And of course, base building, you know, our favorite subject. So the way they started base building was really, really cool. So with base building, they brought out that construction grav cart, and I was already like, because they basically have changed it already. The construction grav cart was not really a thing. Like when Todd Pappy came out and announced the gameplay, they did have some little thing that was on it, but it looked like it could only build like small structures. But I thought that was, I thought it looked different than the thing that they brought out, but maybe that's what it is. Maybe they just changed the way it looked, and maybe it was already a thing. But the construction grav part can only build small things, and then you'll have like a vehicle that's slightly above that, and that vehicle will be able to do medium things, and then there will be a ship above that that can do large things, which we'll talk about later, and then you'll have the Pioneer, which can do extra large things, and then there's a size above that, I think, at the space station level, and we'll talk about that. But let's go back to the grav cart. All right, so grav cart, it allows you to survey the land, it allows you to claim land in a lawful system. If you're in Pyro or something like that, you don't need to claim land, so you would be able to skip that step anyway. So you can build a structure with the grav cart. So you can survey, you can claim the land, and you can build a structure, all with just the grav cart. Now, obviously, you got to take it places, and you need a ship that can carry it, and it's going to be limited in what it can do because it can only build small stuff. But it can fit in smaller ships. They showed it fitting in a Drake cutter, so you're already able to build bases with just the Drake cutter, and you can imagine how useful that could be when it comes to like staying under the radar, right? So maybe you want to go build on some weird part of the moon, and like you want to just go in and put your basic stuff so that you don't have to bring all your ships here. So maybe I take, you know, a very small ship with a low signature, and I take it with my little construction grav cart, and I build all my little stuff that I need just to like make this a home, right? So I need a generator, I need a place to live so I can, you know, log out of the game. I need, you know, a small mining facility. I need, you know, and these are just basic things, a warehouse, you know, these are just basic things that I need so that I can leave, take my Drake cutter back, and then I can come back with maybe a Pioneer or something and finish it out and do everything it needs to be done. But I already have the basics to where I don't have to bring a crap ton of people with me, you know, or you know, whatever. And maybe I just have my security bring me there, and then I can boom, 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 finish all the rest of the stuff. They talked about shields and all that stuff and how it's going to work in kind of the more lawless areas, and how you can keep a shield for a week and how you can run. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, for base building, they very much so simplified it to drones. You deploy a survey drone, and then you zoom into this augmented reality thing where you can place the buildings in the construction mode, and it's really cool. So the construction grav cart has 2 small drones, so that means it can build small structures with the small drones, and each drone operates independently. So the survey drone allows you to see the entire base while you're doing it. The whole build structure UI is actually really cool. You have to have a land claim to actually start building. And when you build a new structure, they had a whole list of things. So let's go through the list of things that they had. So this was actually really cool. They had the foundation square, foundation triangle, small living quarters, medium living quarters, large living quarters. You can't build those. You can only build the small living quarters because you have the small drones, right? Then you have the large solid matter extractor, right? You had a large solid matter. It said large solid matter. I'm assuming that means extractor, but then I saw something that said large solid extractor. So I don't know what that means. Maybe you have to build something connected to it. Maybe it's a large solid matter refinery. And maybe it didn't say that because we were looking at an early build. Then there is, so all of these things that I say, if I say large, that it also has a small and a medium and most likely an extra large version. So then there's the large freight elevator. You can build a small construction hub. We'll talk about what those can do later. I mean, but it's pretty, you could probably already tell. Then they have a T-junction passage. So I'm assuming that you can build some type of tunnel or connect certain things. And then they have a straight passage. They have a large construction hub. So we talked about small construction hubs. So you would be able to build a small construction hub with your small grav cart, with your construction grav cart. And maybe the construction hub can do things that the grav cart can't do. So we can talk about that as well. Then there was the small hangar, medium hangar, large hangar. Then there was the small liquid refinery, medium and large liquid refinery. The small liquid extractor, medium and large. Then there was the small water pump, medium and large. And then the small freight elevator. And of course, we already talked about the large one, but there's also medium. And then there's the small fuel generator, medium and large are there as well. So then there was also this option for existing structure. So I'm assuming, you could upgrade from this as well, but only based on tier level, not necessarily from a small to a medium to a large with the construction grav cart. Now, all of this, obviously, when you build a base, there's going to be resource management that goes with that. So you're going to have to replace fuses, so on and so forth, right? You're going to need a power providing building connected to your other buildings, right? And then they talked about it. There's different types of power. So like, for instance, fuel power, I think they mentioned a few of them. There's like geothermal and fuel, and then there was one other one, like maybe nuclear or something like that. But depending on which power you select, that will determine your maintenance, your supply of fuel, so on and so forth. So maybe nuclear power doesn't require any fuel, but it requires a crap ton of maintenance to stay going, or maybe a crap ton of fuses, or maybe a higher quality fuse, and it doesn't require as much maintenance. So, but it's just harder to come by those higher quality fuses. So you can see how that can kind of work. But a fuel, power source is easy and cheap to build, but it requires a constant supply of stuff, right? Maybe you got to put tree bark into it or something like that. And you got to constantly maintain it because they're always breaking down, because cheap means it's probably going to break down a lot, right? All right, and then you go to then they have this terminal section where that gives you the status of the building. It allows you to activate the building, because when you build something, that doesn't mean it's activated. And then you can put item fabricators inside buildings. So remember, when we talk item fabricators, we're not talking about construction buildings. Those are separate. An item fabricator is for just the items, like those are player-held item things, right? Or things that are part of a larger structure that might be base building. You might need for base building, right? So maybe for an item fabricator, you can imagine you can build a fuse with a fabricator, and maybe you got a tier 5 fuse that you put in, and basically these things last for like 2 weeks or something like that before they give out. So you don't have to worry about doing any maintenance for 2 weeks if you have a tier 5 extractor, and then 2 weeks real time, right? If you have a tier 5 fuse. But maybe you can also, because it's tier 5, you can refill the fuse. So maybe if you take the fuse and put it through a refinery again, you can just refill it and reuse it, rather than, and all the other tiers of fuse, you can't do that. So you can imagine how these things could still help you with your base building stuff, right? All of this stuff was really cool. So this we're still talking about the construction grav cart. It said is one of the 4 base building tools. So they have, this is kind of, I'm thinking the on foot, and then you have the vehicle version, which I think is going to be the medium build stuff, and maybe there might be a ship. I think maybe the ship that we're going to talk about later can do medium and large, because I think even if it's larger, it can still do the lower level stuff. And then ship, obviously that's where you're going to get your large, and then and higher, and then there's construction building. So you have the on foot is most likely going to be small. Maybe there might end up being a medium thing, I don't know, but so far it's only small. Then vehicle, we know that may have more drones, so it might have 4 small drones, or it can have, 2 medium drones. And then we can have a ship, which could have 2 large drones, 2 extra large drones, 4 extra large drones, whatever. And then you can have the construction building where there's kind of no limit if you get, the largest construction building, then there's no limit really to what you can build depending on where that is. And we'll talk about why that matters, right? So if you build a construction building on land, there's a limit, right? But if you build it somewhere else, there may not be a limit. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. I don't want to get ahead of myself on this stuff. So then there's construction AR mode. So this allows you to assess the land. This allows you to see if the area is off limits to construction. Maybe it's a nature reserve. It'll tell you about the extraction deposits. It'll say, this area has 2,032 SCU of kyptazine at 703 quality. And we're assuming, again, that this is quality goes up to 1,000. So we know that's fairly high quality. It's not crap quality, but it's also not the best quality either, right? So, but hey, 70% good quality, is pretty good quality. That's enough to where either maybe you want to sell that, or maybe it's good enough to use for some low level stuff. So you might say, oh, I want to get that. Or maybe you're like, nah, I only deal with 800 quality or better. Because maybe you have some more experience and you know that at the very least you need this certain quality to create something. So yeah, and then it tells you your item count out of 10 meters. It tells you your weekly tax out of 1,000. And so these are all things that I noticed when you look up on those little bars that they were showing. And then there's the structure creation screen, and everything has a tier level that you build. So you select what you build. It could be generic. It could be HABs. It could be corridors, like something that's not generic, like resources and crafting. So this would be your solid extractor, your liquid extractor, your gas extractor, or chemical, whatever that is. The liquid might be chemical, whatever it is, right? And then you build your structure. Again, everything has a quality level. So you use solids, and maybe that's your steel, your plastic. And then one of the things they had up there was QG tallow, and then diamond laminate for your glass, right? And then you have your structure materials, right? So if you're building a structure, the structure part determines the integrity, which, you could say that's kind of your health, the health of your building. And maybe you need steel in order to create the structure. Then there's the cladding. We don't know what the purpose is, but for cladding, I would say that's either gonna affect your power requirement or your water requirement. And that's what QG tallow was used for. And then your substructure, that determines the wear resistance, right? So how long will this structure last when the weather and everything starts to hit it? And that was used, they used plastic for that. And then the glass, we don't know what that required, what that affects, but we know it's either power requirement or water requirement, right? And then those are your statistics: integrity, wear resistance, power requirement, water requirement, and hacking level, right? So glass might be hacking level, substructure might be hacking level, cladding might be hacking level. I would guess maybe that cladding has something to do with hacking level, and then your substructure probably going to be your power requirement maybe, and then glass is your water requirement, so on and so forth. I don't know what these are. I'm just kind of trying to figure out which one is connected, because the only ones that they really gave us were the structure being for integrity or health, and then the substructure determining wear and resistance. So I mistook that when I said substructure. So we really don't know what the glass is for. We don't know what the cladding is for, because they just didn't show it. But then there's resource management after you build the building, right? So you've built your structure. Now you have to worry about power. Like I said, they mentioned fuel generator. Like a fuel generator might provide 500 power, and they say, let's say a HAB takes 45 power. That means you have 465 power left, and 3 HABs would leave 365. Now, I know you didn't come here for math, but essentially 45 plus 45 plus 45. That's the math that I did to figure out that if you built 3 HABs, you would only have 365 power left to give from that large fuel generator. Now, you either can build another fuel generator, or you can get rid of a building so you can lower your requirement. Now, They mentioned there will be fusion generators and there will be geothermal generators. Maybe on Earth, you're no longer allowed to build large fuel generators because they're worried about the environment. So maybe you can only build fusion or geothermal, which means if all you have is the ability to do large fuel generators, you're not going to be able to build on Earth. And so I can imagine that being really cool if they integrate it the right way. And then there was like water, and then there was shield, and there was freight. So these are all the resources that you would have to manage after building. You have to make sure you have enough water because certain things will require water. Make sure you have enough power. Make sure you're shielded, especially if you're in a low security environment where you have to really focus on getting your own shielding. But maybe you don't care about that stuff. Maybe you only built this to have a few, to make money as long as it lasted. And if it gets destroyed, you're like, whatever, I'll build another one. Or if somebody else takes it over, you'll just come and blow it up. You know, I don't know what you plan to do in the game, but I just love that my mind kind of goes crazy with this stuff. Then you can, of course, upgrade your buildings, right? So you've built it, you've managed it, now you can upgrade it. So it said structures only have 3 tiers. So I think earlier I might have said that they have more. I'm pretty sure they only have 3 tiers because I think that's what it said, but I don't know if it'll stay that way. So that might just be like, because they're just starting out, they're only giving buildings 3 tiers, but I can imagine that going a little further and having the 6 tiers of other items or something like that. Then there's networking enhancement. So that determines your hacking difficulty. So then there's certain upgrade materials, right? So for solid, they had Durasteel, Bioplastic, Elespo, Electrium. I don't even know what those last 2 are, but still, these are the things that you use, right? And then of course, there's the ability to decorate your base. So you can buy furniture, craft furniture, or find furniture and bring it back. All of these things still have tier levels, right? So like maybe the furniture you buy, maybe it's pleather, so it only takes people sitting on it 100 times and then it starts to look like crap. Whereas if it was like real leather or like quasi leather or something like that, then it would take 1,000 seats in order for it to look like crap. So, this is all stuff that you can kind of just assume is in the game just based on like quality levels for how things work. But then they had this decorator AR mode. So that uses holograms. It had direct inventory access. It allows you to mag lock things so that only you and the people you allow can move your stuff. So people aren't just gonna run in your house and be like, I'm taking your couch, and lift it up and leave. And that's how it seems like they're gonna be doing a lot of stuff with mag locking. We'll come back to that. And then there was like a first person view where you can do decorating stuff. You can decorate your personal hangars, they mentioned, and you can decorate your ships. Which will just remember that you can decorate your hangars and you can decorate your ships. Remember that for when we talk about insurance. So there was a full loop. This is survey, construct, manage, maintain, personalize, decorate. Those are your 6 things. You got to survey, make sure you can put it where you want to put it. You construct it and build it. Then you have to manage it and maintain it. Then you have to personalize it and decorate it. Well, you don't have to personalize it and decorate it, but most people will. Put your name on it, let people know that this is yours. So then there's the industrial base, right? So you can build an industrial base. This is where I think Declan Holmes came out. Senior systems designer, they did this part. The biggest thing is the construction hub building, right? So the construction hub, regardless of which size you build, it will have 4 drones. So that'll be either small, medium, or large. I think in the video they had a large one, and it can construct extractors. So that means you may not be able to do certain extractors with the construction grav cart. I don't know, but it looked like you could do extractors with the construction grav cart. So we'll see if that's the case. You can deform the land, and it didn't mention that you can deform the land with the construction grav cart. So I don't know if small things can deform land. Maybe you need at least that medium, or maybe you need at least 4 drones to deform the land. I don't know because they didn't really go into detail, but maybe you can deform all the land with all the drones. But I could imagine that being like, no, you need to at least have the building in order to deform the land. So that might be the difference maker between whether you build a construction hub building or whether you just use your construction grav cart. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but that's kind of what I gathered from it, that maybe there'll be a difference from what a ship can do, or at least what the smaller ships and smaller grav cart things can do versus what the larger ships and the building construction hub buildings can do. So of course, like I said before, you have to maintain your buildings. So that means using craft materials for wear. You have to replace the fuses that are inside of those. I talked about, you know, how potentially a replaced fuse could work, whereas like maybe certain fuses that are higher tier can last longer. There's a crack in the outer shell of your power station or something, and you have to remove that other part. You have to break that off, like cut that part off, and then you have to attach another piece, and then, you know, that will melt in with the rest of it, and then now, you know, that increased the integrity of the thing by, you know, 200 or something. So now you don't have to worry about the physical part of it going bad again for a while, especially if you used high quality parts to replace it. And then they talked about the freight elevator network. So the freight elevator network, this part was actually pretty cool. They said you can connect them. So the freight elevators, the things that they just kind of introduced 2 patches ago, you will be able to put your stuff in one freight elevator, it'll go down, and then all your freight elevators are connected based on how you connected them. And then you can go to a different freight elevator and pull up the same stuff from that other freight elevator as long as they're connected. Now that's on the same base, that's all they confirmed. They said that it works within the same base, but that is really cool because I can imagine putting some stuff like maybe my landing pad and everything is way the heck over here, but all my construction stuff is way over here. So I can boom, land, put all my stuff into the base, and then, you know, fly over to the other area, or, you know, maybe use one of my land vehicles to get to the other area. And then, you know, I started doing my construction and I could just pull all the stuff up that I need for my construction without having to move it over here, because I do think that would be a little tedious. But there is a distance limit, so it's not like you can have these massive expanding bases and do it, but I can see daisy chaining them to move it as much as you want, you know. And anything stored in one would essentially be able to be retrieved from the other. That's what it means for those to be connected. And then, of course, if you have other people in your crew, you can grant access to those buildings and tools and construction. And then they talked about the fabrication hangar a little bit, and they showed it building a Zeus Mark II. So you can, you know, kind of set up a chop shop if that's what you kind of want to do, where you go and steal these vehicles. And they talked about how you can end up keeping those vehicles too, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. But you can imagine pirates going, finding vehicles, figuring out, you know, hacking into them and being able to steal them. Or maybe the door is just open and you walk in and fly away. And then bringing those back, and you can't sell it or whatever. Maybe you can sell it on the gray market or the dark market or whatever they call it, the black market. And then you could sell it, or you could see maybe you take out all the components and you break it down to its basic components using one of these fabrication hangars, and then you just take those components. And maybe it's not enough to build a new ship, but maybe it's half the amount of stuff you need to build a new ship after you broke it down, because some will get lost in process for sure. And then maybe if you steal another one, and now you have all the pieces you need to just build the ship, right? And maybe you can only build a lower tier version of it, but now you can build a ship using all the parts that you took from the other 2 ships, and you can build your own ship. So I can imagine that working and being a really cool way. It's like, well, all I got to do is steal 2 of them, and then I can build my own. Or maybe it'll be much more than that. Maybe it'll be you got to steal 4 of them, and then that's a way that you build your own ship. Is like, I just steal a bunch of ships and then break them down for parts, and then by the time I get to the 4th one, I can build my own, and then I don't have to worry about all this other stuff. But maybe some of those parts have ID numbers and stuff, so we don't know exactly how that's going to work, but it's going to be cool. I can already see it. It also mentions selling things. So if you have a terminal, like a sales terminal, it'll automatically list the items and stuff you have for sale. So people can just come up to the terminal, look through it, and buy whatever they want. Or you can set up a physical shop that has everything mag locked, and they can walk in, try certain stuff on and stuff, and then it won't be unmag locked until they actually purchase it. And this isn't a system you have to run, it just automatically works that way. And then that allows you to advertise your stuff a little bit better. But they would have to physically travel to the base in order to get that stuff, obviously. So, obviously, if you have your Banu Merchantman, you can see that people would be able to buy stuff from the Banu Merchantman. So it's not like this online store like Amazon where they can order the stuff and it gets delivered to them. But I would say never to that. And then they had foundation decals. So you can mark the ground for what you want to be in that area. So maybe you say this is a staging area. Maybe you say this is a loading area. This is a cargo area, whatever. So like, let's say you're in a fairly secure law system, and you want to have an area where as soon as people land their cargo ships, they can take all of their cargo and put it in this designated area, and then a designated person will come out and load it into the freight elevator. So this is your staging area, cargo staging area. You can put a decal that says cargo staging area up to 4,000 SCU. So then any ship that lands there, if they have anything less than 4,000 SCU, they know they're gonna put it here. And then for anything above 4,000 SCU, you can even put that. Anything above 4,000 SCU, go to the other side of loading or something like that. Just instructional stuff that just makes it really cool, especially if you have players creating this stuff. And I think the easier you make it, the more people are gonna wanna visit your base and spend their money there. Again, this is all design stuff that I think is just really cool. And the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, yes, this is so cool. You can earn paints in-game for your buildings. You can earn paints in-game for your bases. You can add your own unique text to the buildings, right? So you can put your name on the buildings, your org name on the buildings. And then they talked about farming and ranching just a little bit, but enough to where we kind of know where that's going. And this is one of the reasons I love day 2, is because they kind of opened up and told everybody these are what your roles are going to be in the game. Now, some of them they went into more detail than others, but they're basically telling you, hey, what type of gameplay are you into? This is kind of the road we're going down for each one of these. So for farming, they had high tech and low tech. So if you got the high tech, that requires a hydroponic building, and that means you can grow exclusive strains of certain things, because maybe you can introduce certain effects that wouldn't exist in nature, right? So maybe you can do a hot day and then a cold day, then a hot day, then a cold day. And like if you cycle that enough, you'll create some unique version of a plant or something like that. There's low tech. This is different. So this is basic farming. You have to go get the seeds, then you have to plant the seeds in the correct environment. You know, this might be you don't have hydroponics, right? This is just doing it outside. So maybe you got the seeds for a plant from a destroyed planet, and you can't plant them on that planet because the environmental conditions don't exist. So you have to go to the moon of that planet and then plant it there. And now you have a certain strain of grass that you can only get if you take seeds from this planet and put it in the soil of this planet, right? Because they talked about that. Soil, temps, water, light, all those things matter. We talked about that, I believe, in the very first video, the day 1 video, right? You'll have to supply those things with nutrients, right? You have to give it plant food. Plants need food, right? Now, obviously it can use the sun, but you have to make sure that the soil has the right things in it. Maybe it needs certain types of things added to the soil, you know, like I had read somewhere that there's some plant that like grows better if you give it Coca-Cola like every once in a while instead of water, which is like insanely cool, I think. But you can imagine stuff like that where it's like, I don't need, maybe it wants pure water, maybe it wants dirty water or water from a certain place, and that'll make it grow faster or grow differently. So these are all things that I can imagine making the farming gameplay much deeper. They didn't talk about all those, they didn't talk about it that deeply, but these are just things that I can imagine happening here. Harvesting. Harvesting is going to be unique, I think, as well, because you can make it to where you need certain things to harvest something, right? It might be that in order to harvest it, you can't just walk up to it and pull it out of the ground. It may be that if you do that, you will destroy the crop. So it might be that you need a harvesting machine to get it out of the ground. It may be that you need a certain tool to pull it out of the ground and without destroying it. So these are all ways where you can make farming and ranching gameplay deeper, of course. Now, we didn't talk about ranching, let's talk about ranching. So you can keep herds of animals, right? Now they're gonna require certain amounts of food and certain types of food, right? And that might limit what you can keep, because maybe you want to keep a bunch of quasi-grazers, but you don't have grass. So you can't keep them because they require grass. So until you get a store of grass, right? Maybe you grow some in a hydroponics area off to the side, you can't have them, right? And if you can't grow a field of grass for them to travel around in, that's another maintenance step, because now you're gonna have to take the grass from the hydroponics area and bring it to the cows all the time. And that's a huge waste of time, because you probably should have built a farm where they can just graze the land, and then all you have to do is keep seeding the land to make sure that they always have food. So yeah, and then they'll need shelter, right? Like they are animals. They can die from the elements and stuff like that. So if you pick the planet that has raging earthquakes and you put your farm on that planet, they could get swallowed up if there's an earthquake and a crack builds in, you know. So maybe you have to build like a earthquake proof area for your quasi grazers or something like that. So that could all be really cool. And it also says that not every animal can be ranched. So you can't go and get a Valacar and then try to put that in a ranch and say, I have a Valacar ranch. That's not how it works. So not every animal, and I think that's a good idea, but maybe, just maybe, like you'll find, you know, a person in the verse or something that has managed to do it once or twice, and then you can get some type of special thing from them. So I can imagine these things not being in the very first level, just because they want you to have an understanding of how the base level works. And then when they do 2.0 or 3.0 versions of this, maybe they add in some of the stuff they're saying you can't do. So there was also these archetypes, different types of stuff you can build, right? You can build landing pads, you can build garages, roads, fencing, and then you could build variants of all of those things. And then they talked about XL structures, right? And those being much bigger than the large structures, right? And then they talked about defensive structures. These are your gates, your anti-air guns, your anti-air missiles, your anti-personnel guns, and then walls instead of fences, because fences might be something where if I have a tank, I can just go straight through a fence. But if I have a wall, I have to blow a hole in the wall before I can take my tank through it. So you can imagine them being different things. Maybe fences are only there to keep out animals and people that don't have guns or lasers to cut those things, you know, but walls are obviously more defensive. Then there is the area that you choose to build the base in, right? So we talked about there's going to be high sec, low sec, and medium sec. Now, they didn't talk a lot about medium sec, but if you go back to the 2023 CitizenCon, in that one, they specifically talked about low, medium, and high sec. They said in low security, that's basically lawless. You got to provide your own defenses. Then in medium security, you will be provided some defenses, and it'll be by whatever faction runs that particular area. So like in order to get medium security, it has to be a faction run area. So let's say, I don't know, it's the Explorers Guild or whatever. So the Explorers Guild, or maybe it's Science, I think the Science Guild is the Explorers Guild. So let's say it's the Science Guild. The Science Guild might say, we're going to provide you some protection as far as shield tech, but we're not going to actually send people out to fight for you, so you're going to have to actually defend your own base. Or we'll send people out, but we're not going to give you shield tech. So like, you have to wait for us to get there, so you have to be able to defend yourself long enough for us to get there. You only get some version of defense in a medium security, but they didn't talk about exactly what that defense will be. And then in high security, that's when you get the planetary shield tech. That's when you have to pay taxes to build and all of that stuff. Keep that in mind. You can own bases as an org, so you don't have to just be like, oh, this is my base and my org has no access to it. You can say, I think what it's gonna be is you're gonna be able to transfer ownership from yourself to the org and from your org to a person. So that's the end of that part. And then we started talking about the ships. So this is the part where John Crew and Ben Curtis came out. So we'll separate this part, so we'll stop here, and there will be another section. If I cut this video up, it'll end up being a stop here. So if you're just watching for that part, you'll have your next part, and you'll be good to go.